One Christmas was so much like the other. In those years around the sea town corner now, out of all sound except distant speaking of the voices I sometimes hear a moment before I sleep, then I can never remember whether it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights when I was 12, or whether it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights when I was 6. All the Christmases rolled down towards the two-tongued sea like a cold and headlong moon bundling down the sky that was our street. And they stopped at the rim of the ice age, fist-freezing wave, and I plunge my hands in the snow and bring out whatever I can find. In goes my hand into that wool-white bell-tongue ball of holidays resting at the rim of the carol-singing sea, and out come Mrs. Protero and the fireman. It was on the afternoon of the day of Christmas Eve, and I was in Mrs. Protero's garden, waiting for cats, with her son Jim. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. December, in my memory, is white as Lapland. Although there were no reindeers, but there were cats. Patient, cold, and careless, our hands wrapped in socks, we waited to snowball the cats. Sleek and long as jaguars and horrible whiskered, spitting and snarling, they would slide and sidle over the white back garden walls. And the lynx-eyed hunters, Jim and I, fur cape and moccasined trappers from Hudson Bay of Mumbles Rock, would hurl our deadly snowballs at the grin of their eyes. The wise cat never appeared. We were so still, Eskimo-foot Arctic marksmen in a muffling silence of eternal snow. Eternal! Ever since Wednesday, that we never heard Mrs. Potero's first cry from her igloo at the bottom of the garden. Or, if we heard it at all, it was, to us, like the far-off challenge of our enemy and prey, the neighbor's polar cat. But soon the voice grew louder. "Fire!" cried Mrs. Potero, and she beat the dinner's gong. And we ran down the garden with the snowballs in our arms towards the house. And smoke indeed was pouring out of the dining room, and gong was bombilating, and Mrs. Potero was announcing ruin like a town crier in Pompeii. This was better than all the cats in the whale standing on the wall in a row. We bounded into the house, laden with snowballs, and stopped at the open door of the smoke-filled room. Something was burning, all right. Perhaps it was Mr. Potero, who always slept there after midday dinner with a newspaper over his face. But he was standing in the middle of the room, saying, "A fine Christmas!" and smacking at the smoke with a slipper. "Call the fire brigade!" cried Mrs. Potero as she beat the gong. "They won't be here," said Mr. Potero. "It's Christmas!" There was no fire to be seen, only clouds of smoke, and Mr. Potero standing in the middle of them, waving his slipper as though he were conducting. "Do something," he said. And we threw all our snowballs into the smoke. I think we missed Mr. Potero and ran out of the house to the telephone box. "Let's call the police as well," Jim said. "And the ambulance? And Ernie Jenkins. He likes fire." But we only called the fire brigade, and soon the fire engine came, and 3 tall men in helmets broke a hose into the house, and Mr. Potero was got out just in time before they turned it on. Nobody could have had a noisier Christmas Eve. And when the fireman turned off the hose and was standing in the wet, smoky room, Jim's aunt, Miss Potero, came downstairs and peered in at them. Jim and I waited very quietly to hear what she would say to them. She said the right thing always. She looked at the three tall firemen in their shining helmets, standing among the smoke and cinders and dissolving snowballs, and she said, "Would you like anything to read?" Years and years ago, when I was a boy, when there were wolves in Wales and birds the color of red flannel petticoats whizzed past the harp-shaped hills, when we sang and wallowed all night and day in caves that smelled like Sunday afternoons, in them from farmhouse parlors, and we chased with the jawbones of Dickens the English and the bears before the motor car, before the wheel, before the Duchess faced horse, when we rode the deaf and happy hills bareback. It snowed and it snowed. But here a small boy says, "It snowed last year too. I made a snowman and my brother knocked it down, and I knocked my brother down, and then we had tea." But that was not the same snow, I say. Our snow was not shaken from whitewashed buckets down the sky. It came shoaling out of the ground and swam and drifted out of the arms and hands and bodies of the trees. Snow grew overnight on the roofs of the houses like a pure, and Grandfather Mouse minutely eyed the walls and settled on the postman opening the gate like a dumb, numb thunderstorm of white, torn Christmas cards. Were there postmen then too? With sprinkling eyes and wind-charted noses, on spread frozen feet they crunched up to the doors and mittened on them manfully. But all that the children could hear was a ringing of bells. "You mean that the postman went a rat-tat-tat and the doors rang?" "I mean that the bells that the children could hear were inside them." "I only hear thunder sometimes, never bells." "There were church bells too." "Inside them?" No. In the bed black, snow-white belfries, tucked by bishop and stores, and they rang their tidings over the bandaged town, over the frozen foam of the powder and ice cream hills, over the crackling sea. It seems that all the churches bombed for joy under my window, and the weathercocks crew for Christmas on our fence. Go back to the postman. They were just ordinary postmen, fond of walking and dogs and Christmas and the snow. They knock on the doors with blue knuckles. Ours has got black knockers. And then they stood on the white welcome mat in the little drifted porch and huff and puff, making ghosts with their breath, and jog from foot to foot like small boys wanting to go out. And then the presents? And then the presents after the Christmas box, and the cold postman with a rose on his button nose tingled down the tea-tray slittered ground of the chilly gliding hill. He went in his ice-bound boots like a man on fishmonger slabs. He wagged his back like a frozen camel's hump, dizzily turned the corner of one foot, and, by God, he was gone. Get back to the presents. There were the useful presents, engulfing mufflers of the old coast days, and mittens made for giant sloths, zebra scarf of a substance like silky gum that could be tucked or worn down to the gallows, blinding tam-o' shanters like patchwork tea cozy, and bunny-suited busbies and balaclavas for victims of head-shrinking tribes. From owls who always wore wool next to the skin, there were mustache and rasping face that made you wonder why the owls had any skin left at all. And once I had a little crochet nose bag from an aunt now, Alice, no longer whining with us, and pictureless books in which small boys, though worn with quotations not to, would skate on Farmer Giles' pond and did and drowned, and books that told me everything about the webs except why. Go on to the useless presents. Bags of moist and many colored jelly babies, and a folded flag, and a false nose, and a tram conductor's cap, and a machine that punched tickets and rang a bell, never a catapult. Once by a mistake that no one could explain, a little hatchet, and a celluloid duck that made, when you press it, a most unduck-like sound, a mewing moo that an ambitious cat might make who wished to be a cow. A painting book in which I could make the grass, the trees, the sea, and the animals many color I please, and still the dazzling sky blue sheep are gazing in the red field under the rainbow bill and pea green birds. Hard boils, toffee, fudge, and all sorts, crunches, cracknels, humbugs, glaciers, marzipans, and butter Welsh for the Welsh, and troops of bright tin soldiers who, if they could not fight, could always run, and snakes and families, and happy ladders, and easy hobby games for little engineers, complete with instructions. Oh, easy for Leonardo. And a whistle to make the dogs bark to wake up the old man next door, to make him beat on the wall with his stick to shake our picture off the wall. And a package of cigarettes. You put one in your mouth and you stood at the corner of the street and you waited for hours in vain for an old lady to scold you for smoking a cigarette, and then with a smirk you ate it. And then it was breakfast under the balloons. Were there uncles like in our house? There are always uncles at Christmas. The same uncles. And on Christmas mornings, with dog-disturbing whistle and sugar facts, I would scour the SWAT town for the news of the little world and find always a dead bird by the post office or the white deserted swings, perhaps a robin, all but one of his fires out. Man and woman wading, scooping back from chapel, with tapeworm noses and wind-brushed cheeks, all albinos huddle their stiff back Joring's feathers against the irreligious snow. Mistletoe hung from the gas brackets in all the front parlors. There was shirley and walnuts and bottled beer and crackers by the dessert spoons. And cats, in their fur-abouts, watched the fires. And the high-heaped fire spat, all ready for the chestnuts and the mulling pokers. Some few large men sat in the front parlors, without their collars, uncles almost certainly, trying their new cigars, holding them out judiciously at arm's length, returning them to their mouths, coughing, then holding them out again as though waiting for the explosion. And some few small aunts not wanted in the kitchen, nor anywhere else for that matter, sat on the very edges of their chairs, poised and brittle, afraid to break like faded cups and saucers. Not many those mornings trod the piling streets, An old man always found bowler yellow glove, and at this time of year, with spats of snow, would take his constitutional to the white bowling green and back, as he will take it wet on fire on Christmas Day or Doomsday. Sometimes two hale young men with big pipes blazing, no overcoats and wind-blown scarf would trudge unspeaking down to the foreign sea to work up an appetite to blow away the fumes. Who knows, to walk into the waves until nothing of them was left but the two curling smoke clouds of their inextinguishable briars? Then I would be slapdashing home, the gravy smell of a dinner of others, the bird smell, the brandy, the pudding, and mince coiling up to my nostrils. When out of a snow-clogged side lane will come a boy, the speed of myself, with a pink-tipped cigarette and the violet pass of a black eye, cocky as a bullfinch, leering all to himself. I hated him on sight and sound, and would be about to put my dog whistle to my lips and blow him off the face of Christmas, when suddenly he, with a violet wings, put his whistle to his lips and blew so stridently, so high, so exquisitely loud, that gobbling faces, their cheek bulged with goose, would press against their tinsel windows the whole length of wide echoing street. For dinner we had turkey and blazing pudding, and after dinner the uncle sat in front of the fire, loosened all buttons, put their large moist hands over their watch chains, groaned a little and slept. Mothers, aunts and sisters cuddled to and fro bearing tureens. Aunt Bessie, who had already been frightened twice by a clockwork mouse, whimpered at the sideboard and had some elderberry wine. The dog was sick. Auntie Dossie had to have 3 aspirins, but Auntie Hannah, who liked pork, stood in the middle of the snow-bound backyard, singing like a big bosom thrush. I would blow up balloons to see how big they would blow up too, and then when they burst, which they all did, the uncles jumped and rumbled. In the rich and heavy afternoon, the uncles breathing like dolphins and the snow descending, I will sit among festoon and Chinese lanterns and nibble dates and try to make a model man-o'-war, following the instruction for little engineers, and produce what might be mistaken for a sea-going tram car. Or I would go out, my bright new boots squeaking, into the wide world, onto the seaward hill, to call on Jim and Dan and Jack, and to pad through the still streets, leaving huge deep footprints on the hidden pavements. I bet people will think they've been hippos. What would you do if you saw a hippo coming down our street? I'll go like this. Bang! I'll throw him over the railings and roll him down the hill, and then I tickle him under the ear and he'd wag his tail. What would you do if you saw 2 hippos? Iron flank and bellowing, hippos clank and batter through the scuddling snow towards us as we pass Mr. Daniel's house. Let's post Mr. Daniel a snowball through his letterbox. Let's write things in the snow. Let's write, Mr. Daniel looks like a spaniel, all over his lawn. Or we walk on the white shore. Can the fishes see it's snowing? The silent, one-clouded heavens drifted onto the sea. Now we were snow-blind travelers, lost on the North Hills, and fast dewlaps dogs with flags round their necks ambled and shambled up to us, baying Excelsior. We returned home through the poor streets where only a few children fumbled with bare red fingers in the weir-rutted snow and cat-called after us, their voices fading away. As we trudged uphill into the cries of the dog birds and the hooting of ships out in the whirling bay, and then, at tea, the recovered uncles would be jolly, and the ice cake loomed in the center of the table like a marble grave. Auntie Hannah laced her tea with rum, because it was only once a year. Bring out the tall tales now, that we told by the fire, as the gaslight bubbled like a diver. Ghosts wooed like owls in the long nights when I dare not look over my shoulder. Animals lurked in the cubbyhole under the stairs where the gas meter ticked. And I remember that we went singing carols once, when there wasn't the shaving of a moon to light the flying streets. At the end of a long road was a drive that led to a large house, and we stumbled up the darkness of the drive that night, each one of us afraid, each one holding a stone in his hand in case, and all of us too brave to say a word. The wind through the trees made noises as of old and unpleasant, and maybe wet-footed men whizzing in caves. We reached the black bulk of the house. What shall we give them? Hark the herald? No, Jack said. Good King Wenceslas, I'll count 3. 1, 2, 3, and we began to sing. Our voices high and seemingly distant in the snow-felted darkness round the house that was occupied by nobody we knew. We stood close together near the dark door.
Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen, when the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even.
And then, a small dry voice, like the voice of someone who has not spoken for a long time, joined our singing. A small dry Excel's voice from the other side of the door. A small dry voice through the keyhole. And when we stopped running, we were outside our house. The front room was lovely. Balloons floated under the hot water bottle gulping gas. Everything was good again and shone over the town. Perhaps it was a ghost, Jim said. Perhaps it was trolls, Dan said, who was always reading. Let's go in and see if there's any jelly left, Jack said, and we did that. Always on Christmas night, there was music. An uncle played the fiddle, a cousin sang Cherry Ripe, and another uncle sang Drake's Drum. It was very warm in the little house. Auntie Hannah, who had got onto the parsnip wine, sang a song about bleeding hearts and death, and then another in which she said her heart was like a bird's nest. And then everybody laughed again. And then I went to bed. Looking through my bedroom window, out into the moonlight and the unending smoke-colored snow, I could see the lights in the windows of all the other houses on our hill, and hear the music rising from them up the long, steadily falling night. I turned the gas down. I got into bed. I said some words to the close and holy darkness, and then I slept.